we have this monthly event, it's called Politics in the Pub, where we take topics from community, topics that matter to people, and then we sally forth and we find speakers who can hopefully inform you and get a conversation going. Tonight's topic is education. It's been requested by quite a few people. We're really excited for it. Rob, or as I first knew him, Mr. Delves, was a high school teacher when I was at South Fremantle, so I'm extremely excited to hear what he really thinks. Before I introduce the MC, I want to acknowledge the original custodians of this land, the Wajak Noongar people, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Somebody told me recently that when you do the acknowledgement of country, you're supposed to personalize it. So when I was young, I was taught how to play footy by a few Indigenous people at the park, and they played a trick on me by telling me the middle goals were points and the side goals were 6 points. And then when I played with my mates, I thought I was good, and I couldn't understand why they were cross at me. I also want to acknowledge the local hotel and Phil for having us here. It's really good of them to do that. All right, without much further ado, I'm going to introduce our first MC. It's his first time MCing here, Ryan Steed. So, Ryan is an educator and a coach. Having worked for 8 years as a high school English teacher, he now coaches teachers. In fact, he works as an instructional coach at Cecil Andrews with the organisation Shaping Minds. He's passionate about bringing people together to be honest, vulnerable, and to express themselves. And he's made a great start with this. I met Ryan at Carnivale in February, and I was dressed as a harlequin. And he approached me and he was in plain clothes, but he was very impressed by it all, and he said, I want to be involved in this. I want to help people express themselves, and I want to be a bit more of a communitarian. So we met up and had a coffee, and just a couple of months ago, Ryan started the Fremantle Write Night, which is every fortnight at Percy Flint's. So if you're thinking about getting into writing and you just want an opportunity to do so, Ryan has provided an opportunity to do just that. Please welcome Ryan Steed.
I'm actually going to feel a little more comfortable, especially in this first part, standing here and not trying to like stoop down to the microphone or adjust it, so bear with me. And let me know if you can't hear me. As Christian said, my name is Ryan, and I'm a high school teacher, or been a high school teacher for 8 years, focusing on coaching now. And before we do anything else, I'm curious about, the people in the audience tonight. How many, can you please just give us a thumbs up or hand up if you are or were a teacher in any capacity? Okay. And what about if you have a kid or a spouse or a parent who's been a teacher or an education? Okay, so it feels like there's a huge amount of passion and interest, and we've all got skin in the game when it comes to education. And I thought before we welcome our speakers, now that I'm a coach and not really in the classroom as much, I spend a lot of time doing classroom observations, going into teachers' classes. And there was a couple of events that happened that I thought were interesting, reflecting on this topic of educational inequality. One of them was this teacher who set up, he was in his first year of teaching, putting a lot of effort in, very passionate, and he set up this elaborate poetry activity for these students. And he was really working very hard to make it relevant and inspiring for them. He even, got some Tupac lyrics, and there was Bob Marley stuff, and I think he threw some Bob Dylan in there as well, because he was passionate about that. And he really wanted it to go so well. And I was sitting there, and within about, it started off nice enough, because the kids thought it was a bit of novelty. In about 10 minutes, the whole thing had degenerated, and kids were literally clambering on the desks, and squawking was the only word for it, squawking. And that guy worked really hard to improve the behaviour and the culture in that class. By the end of the year, though, it wasn't really a lot better. And, one of the kids at one point said to him, you only have to deal with this group for 1 hour a day. We have to deal with it every class. So that's why I feel dead inside. And that was that teacher and that kid. And another teacher who I worked with, a bit later on in his career, similar group, also a year 10 group, maybe a little bit less challenging. And the kids would come in, he had some very good routines established. They came in, they did their starting activity. The teacher was kind of gliding around the room, checking in, diffusing problems before they started. He wasn't doing as many elaborate poetry activities, but it was a lot of challenging text, explicit vocab teaching, sentence frames, moving to independent writing, very structured, very clear. And then at the end of the class, I noticed this kid walked past him and said, "Oh, thank you, sir, we really appreciate the lesson." And both of those teachers were me. And the first one was me in my first semester of teaching, and the second one was in my fourth or fifth year. And I feel like with this topic of educational inequality, we can't ignore the fact that highly skilled and passion-dedicated teachers are the key thing in improving educational outcomes, especially for the most challenging or disadvantaged students. But we're in a system where, I don't know exactly what the stat is, but it's something like 50% of students, 50% of teachers within their first 5 years of the profession are leaving the profession. So they get to that point of higher skill and expertise, and then they're gone. And what's that doing to educational inequality in Australia? I want to throw that out there. Okay, so we will begin with 5-minute presentations. We're very lucky to have 4 great speakers tonight, all sharing different perspectives. We'll have their presentations. We'll take a 10-minute break, 15-minute break, and then we'll return for an hour of audience questions, ideas, and opinions. So each speaker will have 5 minutes, and you'll see what the little system is for making sure we stick to that time, so we can all get out of here at the right time. I want to introduce our first speaker. His name is Finch. Barry has worked in education for over 35 years. He started his career in a remote Kimberley school and has worked in Indigenous adult ed, as an educator at Banksia Hill Detention Centre, and has spent the past 22 years at Port School, a local school. 10 years in the workshop and 12 years as principal. Since starting as principal, the school has gone from 12 staff and 30 students to currently having 60 staff and 150 students. All students come to Port with substantial educational risk. And I'll just add, having visited Port recently for a little creative writing project, you can feel when there's a sense of community spirit and a family orientation within the school. You can feel it. And that was there so strongly at Port. So strongly. So please give Barry a big round of applause.
I think he said enough, really. I can sit down after that. Port School is there because there is inequality in education. We deal with kids that are failing in the system and who are drowning in anxiety. Not loud enough?
Just for people at the back.
Right. For kids who are failing in the system and not coping well in the mainstream school. I'll just give you a quick rundown of the school so you can get an idea of the difference between Port and most other schools. It started in 1993 in the West End as a school for Frio parents and students who were quite academic, as a school, an alternative to going to South Fremantle, probably. They did really well, but once that parent group and those students doing their equivalent to an ATAR now left, it sort of gradually got taken over by kids who were on the streets and not going to other schools. And so we started right back then, in about 95, as a place for at-risk youth who are not engaging in the system. We are an independent school, and we only take students of extreme risk of failing, disengaging or being excluded from mainstream schools. Most of our students come to us with a 3 to 4 year gap from where they should be in year 8. We start in year 8, go to year 13. Fees are based on income and they start at nothing and move through to $4,000. I mean, we used to be mainly lower socio-economic families coming to the school, but because we have a reputation now for being good with mental health, we do have a lot of middle-class families and coming to school with kids with autism and anxiety. So yeah, the game's changed. In the old days, we had no parents dropping the kids off. Nowadays, we have a few families that drop off kids in Range Rovers. We have small classes, generally 10, and in those classes we have a teacher and a support worker in every class. We have a separate middle school which is run like a primary school. We don't do year 7, but those kids who have just done year 7 at their local school are very happy to go back to a primary school environment because it's just totally wrecked them. So yeah, they love the security and the safety of being in the same class all day like they were in primary school. So we have a middle school for years 8 and 9, a senior school for years 10 to 13. We also have a young parent centre for young mothers up to 21, and they do their education in their own facility, which was the next was a flat over the road which we've expanded, and next to that is a registered daycare centre or early learning centre where their kids go to spend their day while their mums are working on their studies. We have a strong outreach centre, which is where I'm talking a lot slower now than when I did when I was timing myself. We have an outreach centre and we have a mobile classroom for kids who are unable to come to school. We have 2 psychologists and a counsellor. Many of our students suffer from PTSD, ASD, ADHD, anxiety and other mental health conditions. Right. Well, the way we are able to do that, run the school so successfully, is through the Gonski model of funding that has worked in some areas and totally fallen apart in others. And for us, it has worked really well because of the mental health funding model. I don't know what happens to that funding in government schools. I don't see that it gets to the kids that they're putting the money in for. I'm sure it goes to an area and they work out how it's divided. But the system was set up to support kids at the coalface, the kids who need the support, and the lower socio-economic schools that need that extra money are getting it. And I don't know if it worked. And I don't know why some of the independent schools are still receiving so much money, and these schools on the fringes, the government schools on the fringes, are not receiving enough.
Yeah.
So that's how I'd like to start. Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much, Barry. And yeah, having worked at one of those schools on the fringes for a while, I asked myself the same question. Our next speaker is Reuben Smalley. So Reuben is a Year 12 student at Freo College. He's been a keen participant in their debating teams for several years. So was I. And is a very active member of the Fremantle Greens. Please give him a warm welcome.
Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded and this land is and always will be Aboriginal land. I'm going to be honest with you, this script was written this afternoon because I've been in a crunch with ATA, so it's been left very last minute. But when I received the call from Rob around 2 weeks ago, and he asked me to speak here, I instantly said yes. It was without a doubt. Thanks to my mum being very open and talking about it, I've been very interested in the inequality in education and why that occurs and how we can fix it. I've moved across the country from being born in Tasmania, moving to Victoria, then to Northern Territory and then here, experiencing all different types of education systems and teaching styles from all different teachers. And I've also seen how different governments, state governments, can also keep engagement within the classrooms for lower socioeconomic students. But in my experience and in my opinion, it all comes down to resources and fundings of schools. I'm going to try and not bore you with the facts here or statistics, but currently the federal government spends $29 billion in their budget for education, and public education gets $11.2 billion, and private schools get $17.8 billion. That's 61% of the budget for 36% of the students in our national intake for students. So that is a massive funding disparity, and there's a whole lot more schools, public schools, than there is private. And this means that private schools, especially from what I've witnessed, teachers get offers from private schools with higher wages, more enticing, and that means that the better teachers and with more experience, with different classroom types, that means that they actually get taken away from the schools that actually need it and get put into private schools. I have been to tutoring sessions, group tutoring sessions over the past year and a bit to deal with the crunch of ATA, and most of these teachers are private school teachers. And the resources that they give out are incredible. Like, it's almost nothing compared to what you get in public school education. And I tend to ask my teachers, is this the kind of stuff that you give to your own students in class? And they almost always answer yes. So the stuff that I'm not receiving in class, or that the majority of students are not receiving in class, private school students are. This leads to a massive gap in educational outcomes because the students in private school actually understand what they're learning and have a greater understanding compared to those in public school. But it doesn't just stop at educational resources. It also covers non-teacher staff, also programs, and also buildings, like good educational buildings. Whilst government gives additional funding to schools that run programs like the Deadlift Sister Girls or the Clontarf Foundation, students have told me, at my current school we have a large First Nations population, they've told me that they don't feel as if the program is being run to their full extent because of funding shortages. And these programs enable the engagement of these students that have some of the poorest graduation rates. And so that is, so the graduation rate for Year 12s is 68% for First Nations students compared to 91% for any other student, which is a great disparity as well. So being able to build these buildings that would enable these programs to be able to run better is massive key to this engagement in and decreasing the divide between socioeconomic educational outcomes. I've also experienced alternative public school, which is more experiencing stuff like kinesthetic learning, which engages all different types of sensory learning. The engagement within these classrooms is so much higher, and the senior high school that was connected to the primary school that I was in uses those same systems and gets within the top quartile of education. So, because I'm running out of time, I would just like to leave you with a little question to ponder while over this time. How can we create an education system that prioritizes original thought, caters for diverse learning styles, and ensures equal opportunities for all students?
Reuben, that was awesome. I mean, to take time out of your studies like that, we really do appreciate it to get your perspective. Let's give him another round of applause. Our next speaker is Louise Adger. Louise has taught in government, Catholic, Anglican and Uniting Church secondary schools around Perth, Melbourne and London. She's also worked as a pastoral head of year with year 7s, 8s, 9s and 10s. Recently, Louise transitioned from teaching in mainstream secondary schools to teaching in the middle school at Port School, and she says she's absolutely loving this new and dynamic teaching experience. Please give her a warm welcome.
Hi, my name's Louise. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I have to blame Barry, he got me in for this. But I'm very honoured to be part of this really important community program, and I'm really thrilled that you guys are here debating the subject. I've been asked to speak, of course, because I've had quite a bit of private school experience. Please don't hold that against me. As you have introduced, I've been working in secondary schools for 30 years. I've done Catholic, Anglican, Uniting Church, I've worked in the government system, I've worked in the independent system. Every situation and every school is beautifully unique, and I've had amazing experiences at every learning institution I've ever been involved in. I have to say, first off, that private school teachers are very afraid to speak out on this subject for fear of reprisal. Oh, thank you, I do appreciate that, because it is quite difficult, because a lot of people are quick to maybe take your thoughts and statements out of context, and they're very fearful for their jobs. And in this economic climate, as most of you know, private schools are not all the same. We know that there are very well-meaning and very high fee-paying private schools, and equally we know that there are private schools that are not so cash-rich. So my thoughts are really only my thoughts based on my secondary school experience. I wish we had a primary school teacher here today. I think that would be a really valuable insight, but maybe next time. Oh, awesome, thank you very much. Like I said, this topic, I'm here I suppose in a little bit of a devil's advocate role, but it is a difficult subject to discuss because it's laden with a myriad of complexities. Have I felt the inequality in private schools? Yes. Have I felt the sense of entitlement by some? Yes, definitely. And that's why I'm now at Port School. But that's not the whole experience. And I think that's the difficulty. I'm totally in favour of increasing all levels of government funding to all government schools. I wish every student in Australia could get the experience that is given to those highly paid private schools. If every kid in Australia could go to one of our top 10 private schools and have the facilities and have that teaching experience that you've spoken about and have those excellent teachers, have the opportunities to experience all sorts of subjects in a myriad of learning settings, we would be a much wealthier society as a result of that, but unfortunately that's not happening. School teachers, irrespective of the educational system they work in, are doing an amazing job, and they are all wonderfully skilled practitioners. They care about their students and they all want to see them achieving their best. But as I said, not all private schools are the same. You can't lump all private schools together in this discussion, which makes it really tricky. There are mass inequalities between all private schools as well. There are amazing public high schools giving students educational experiences that are wonderful, and there are also public schools that are doing it really tough. Equally, we have the same in private school settings. one of the core recommendations in Gonski in 2011 was to implement that needs-based approach that we've spoken about. And at that time, it was set at $13,000 roundabouts for primary school students and $16,000 for secondary school students. But we know that as governments progressed, some of those decisions made after the Gonski review meant that some systems struck a bit of a deal to make sure that their funding wasn't cut over time. We know that in Western Australia, the state government funding in real terms has gone backwards. So since 2012, one of the reports I read from ACARA said that 7.75% it's dropped. The funding has dropped in WA according to ACARA data. So real government funding per student has increased by 16% in metropolitan areas, by 22% in regional areas, and 20% in outer regional areas. But if you're in a remote area, it has barely risen by 14%. So if you're a child today from a poor background, or from the bush, or you're an Indigenous Australian, you are 3 times more likely to fall behind at school. And that's what we need to fix. We have about 4 million students enrolled in Australian schools at the minute, and that's from the ACARA data from 2023. We know that there are numbers of students in independent schools have increased. In 2013, it was just over 500,000. Now in 2023, it's 666,000. So why are people thinking about choosing private schools? Why are people willing to pay? And as the West Australian, I think, published an article fairly recently talking about the disparity of fees in those schools. I think one of the top schools has about $36,000 a year, and the average across the private school system for fees per year is about $9,000. So I can only go by what parents have told me. Their beliefs and perceptions are that by sending their child to a primary school, a private secondary school, the perception is that the education is better. And Reuben touched on the reasons why that might be, that a lot of staff are poached. They believe that there's less behaviour and disruption to the learning. Parents believe that there are more educational opportunities for their children. There's scholarships, there's overseas educational trips, camps, science camps, music camps, drama opportunities, sporting scholarships, language tours, community service tours. Often there's more educational support for students who are struggling. There are also the fact that students with severe learning difficulties may have parents who want them in what they consider to be a safe environment. There may be traditions of families going to private schools. We know from my experience there's been students from a variety of different backgrounds, whether it be faith-based, so they want their student or their child to go to a faith-based school. Maybe an education is culturally valued, so parents choose a private school. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, but it's not all roses and private schools and parties and cucumber sandwiches. I can certainly tell you from a teacher that you are expected, and it is an expectation at a high fee paying school, that you are producing excellent to exceptional lessons at all times and resources. It's just a given, which meant from my perspective that I was working 6 days a week. As a head of year, I had part of my role and responsibility, which I was very unaware of, was trying to keep students at the school because of the fees that may be lost. And a lot of private schools will never tell you that they're 10 students away from financial difficulty. So there's a lot of pressure on the staff to retain students and retain families. I was just going to talk, kids from the rural and regional areas, sometimes that's the choice that their parents make, is because there's no other school for them to go to. Indigenous scholarships are sometimes providing, hopefully, that educational gap for a lot of students. But like I said, I really hope, my hope is that we can distribute the wealth. I wish we were Finland. I wish we could distribute the wealth and every kid would have quality and excellent education in Australia. So if you've got any solutions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. And our fourth speaker tonight is...
Sorry, Ryan.
Our fourth speaker tonight is Rob Delves. This is pretty entertaining. Rob retired in 2019 after 51 years as a secondary school teacher. Let's give that a round of applause. That's cool. I like this bit. He reached the dizzying heights of the head of the English department in his 3rd year. And that was his peak achievement, mainly because a restless urge led him to teach in 3 different states, 3 countries, private and state systems, and across several different subject areas. Consequently, in his own words, Rob knows just a little about a very large number of things, and he greatly looks forward to sharing that shallowness with us tonight. So please give him a warm welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm only going to share one idea tonight, but I'll use my full 5 minutes because I will repeat it over and over again, which has always been my favourite teaching strategy. And the idea is this: diversity, mix them up, is the secret of success in an education system. We're talking curriculum, we're talking about variety of adults and experiences, but we're particularly talking student intake. It was best expressed by Henry Parkes. You've probably heard of him. He's called the father of federation. Local school, welcoming everyone from different backgrounds, learning side by side. And I think that's a beautiful encapsulation of both the diversity and the equality that we need for a successful system. I'd like to give a few experiences that I've had that will illustrate this main point about diversity. So I went to a private boys' school in Melbourne from year 1 to 12. How would I rate it? Pretty simple. I wish I had not gone there. There was another group of people who expressed the same wish whenever they met me, and that was every female I tried to form a relationship with. Yes. Now, absence of girls was the big failure of diversity, but it wasn't alone. It was a middle class monotony. There weren't any working class kids there. And also the curriculum was extremely narrow, academic, and that's about it. No, hang on, sport. They loved their sport at that school. The big vision of the school was muscular Christianity. I failed that every year I was there. As one of my friends quipped, "You are the skinniest atheist that the school has ever produced." In 1973, I went to England for 1 year and ended up staying there for 13. I taught at 2 schools and they couldn't be more different. First of all, Harrow School, I think a few of you may have heard of it, produces weird Tory MPs that rule the country. And it's a bastion, monastic bastion of ultra privilege. Then I moved on to a very typical state comprehensive school for 8 years. There's one memory I want to share that I think really captures the contrast and the unfairness. In 1 year at the comprehensive school, I got to know 2 Year 9 students really well. I taught them 2 subjects. They were so enthusiastic. They weren't gifted, but they worked their asses off. They wanted desperately to get into the year 10 and 11 academic stream, which in those days was called O-levels. I think some of you have heard that. The senior teacher at the school refused to allow them to go into that stream because he said they didn't have the academic ability to do it. I was raging and screaming at him because I said, look, at Harrow, I helped get kids through O-levels who weren't as committed and probably not even as intelligent as those 2 kids. But we did it by lots and lots of extra tuition in small groups. And I know that if those 2 kids had that same level of support, they would end up with a very, very good set of O-levels. And he replied, well, that's Harrow. We don't provide that sort of help here. Final story I want to mention is Kwinana Senior High School. I taught there for 10 years in the 1990s. I think most of you would agree that the biggest barrier to this vision of people from different backgrounds learning together side by side is that our suburbs are social class divided, aren't they? You're not going to get a mixture of people. Kwinana, obviously a working class suburb, and therefore more than its due share of disadvantaged and difficult to teach kids. However, it was made much worse by two things. First of all, there were these schools. Now, South Fremantle in those days had a very, very good academic program and a very good drama program, and lots of the Kwinana kids were drawn to that school. In addition, there were private schools opening up, and they were attracting some of the more ambitious and keen kids. So because of those two things, Kwinana's level of disadvantage and concentration of disadvantage was skewed down and down and down. The teachers there, I think, did a brilliant job with imaginative, interesting ideas, that it was a tough gig, and they didn't deserve to have to do that if we had this proper, everybody from different backgrounds learning side by side. In conclusion, I really wish that we didn't have these selective high schools like Perth Modern and Shenton and that sort of place, and I wish we didn't have private schools. I think they're a classic example of what is good for some parents and kids, and gives them a lot of benefit. That choice is bad for the system overall. We lose this social cohesion of everyone learning side by side, and we lose the academic input emphasis of having lots of different people in the school. I'd like to end with a provocative statement. I 3/4 agree with it. If we want to improve our educational outcomes, Australia should return to Henry Park's vision. If we continue championing the John Howard Liberal Party idea that parental choice is the only thing that matters, we will become more and more divided. Also, I think we will become an increasingly stupid country.
Strong, provocative, bold words to end on. Thank you very much. Another big round of applause for all four of our speakers tonight. So it's now 7:39. Let's take a, let's say 10-minute break. And we'll be back here at 7:50. Please go grab a drink, grab something to eat, have a chat, and we'll be back here at 7:50 to kick off audience questions and statements. So see you in 10 minutes.